Welcome to the Southern Nationalist Network podcast, your voice for Southern independence.
We are and brave, like patriots of old, we'll fight our heritage to save. And rather than
Hey folks, thanks for listening today. And for our first guest for our podcast, we have a Southern activist, a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and a friend of mine, Clint Lacy from Missouri. Clint, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, Clint, it's just great to talk with you, although we have kind of a sad topic to talk about today. And that was, it made, I guess, international news. I saw it actually in foreign papers as well. But a Confederate monument there in southeastern Missouri was defaced. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was a monument to the Confederate soldiers of southeast Missouri, and it was dedicated by the United Daughters of the Confederacy in 1931, and it sits on the grounds of the Common Pleas Courthouse in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And I believe it was October 11th. Somebody spray painted graffiti, if you will, all over it. The newspaper didn't say exactly what all of it was. It said it had the terms "Go South," "You're in the Union," "Move it to the cemetery," and mentioned several expletives that were spray painted on it.
So these were pro-Union criminals, which Missouri has had an unfortunate history of having to deal with.
That's correct. It didn't really seem like your average anti-Southern vandals, if you will. I read the news a lot, and it seems like when it's your run-of-the-mill anti-Southern people, they usually spray paint references to the KKK or something like this. But in this case, it was a little different, It wasn't just calling our ancestors hate mongers. It was specifically pro-Union propaganda graffiti, if you will.
Was the monument damaged other than I guess they used spray paint, and I read that they had a difficult time getting it off. Have they gotten the graffiti off, or is it permanently damaged?
For the most part, it is off. There's still a little bit of light coloration. City of Cape said they do not want to sandblast it. They don't want to damage the monument. But they hired Lively Monument Company in Marble Hill, Missouri, to try and take the paint off. And one of the workers from Lively said that the spray paint was put on so thick that it probably would have seeped into the pores of new marble. So these people, they took their time, and in this vandalism of this monument, it wasn't just a hit-and-run thing. They really hated it. And they really took the time to try and damage it permanently.
And has there been any leads or any arrest in the case?
That's the sad part about it. It's just my gut telling me this, but I really don't think the Cape Girardeau Police Department wants to apprehend somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid, but how can I put this? There's really no nice way of putting it. I'm afraid that they're afraid if it's a person of the wrong color that we catch doing this, there's going to be severe unrest or something of that nature, and I think they're just trying to cool it off.
Sure.
I know the Missouri Sons of Confederate Veterans, they gave the approval for me to submit a press release calling for this to be prosecuted as a hate crime. I put the press release out to everybody. The radio station, well, there was one media outlet that interviewed me, and it was an AM radio station out of Cape Girardeau, which is Rush Limbaugh's hometown. And it was like a quick 30-second soundbite of me saying, why we want this prosecuted as a hate crime. But that was it. The TV station that interviewed me would not publish it. The newspaper that interviewed me, I got it published on there, but it was through their self-publication tool, so they didn't officially publish it in their print version. I had to submit it for a self-submitted story. Fortunately, if you Google, the monument Cape Girardeau monument damage or hate crimes, Cape Girardeau, something of that nature, it does pop up as a legitimate news story, thankfully. But since releasing that press release, because everybody said, well, everybody I talked to that's not involved in this, they questioned whether we could prosecute it as a hate crime or not because it deals with individuals, and I say we can, simply on the basis of national origin. Confederacy was a country.
Right.
Suspended Confederate soldiers, they can claim that as a national origin. But what I also found, I started digging through state law, and if they were really serious about prosecuting this, they could do it under a state hate crimes law, which specifically mentions the vandalism of military monuments.
That's interesting. I know here in South Carolina there's laws against burning or defacing the U.S. flag, the state flag, or the Confederate flag. And I don't know how that would have applied to monuments, but I don't know if you have anything like that in Missouri or not.
Not as far as flags, but under this, I can't quote the exact section number of this law, but I did find, and it specifically mentioned synagogues, churches, cemeteries, and it specifically mentioned the words military monuments. So if they were really serious about prosecuting this, they would be investigating this a little harder, and they would be prosecuting this under the state's hate crime law.
Well, we can imagine what would happen if this had been a monument to Abraham Lincoln, and it had been defaced with Confederate messages, or heaven forbid, it had been a monument to Martin Luther King, and it had been defaced with Confederate messages. I can imagine a swarm of federal agents would have descended upon southeastern Missouri by now.
Yeah, it would have been a little bit like the movie The Fugitive. They'd be calling to look under every outhouse, chicken house. The line, Tommy Lee Jones line. But yeah, they just seem to be content for we cleaned it up. We're not going to worry about it.
You responded to the attack and went out there and actually stood by the monument. And I've seen a picture of you online. I believe in the picture you're talking with a black lady. Is that correct? Are you familiar with the picture I'm talking about?
Yeah. What I did is I had my Confederate battle flag on a wooden stick. I wanted to take a sign, and I was just sitting there thinking, what would get the maximum amount of attention? What can I put on the sign? It just dawned on me, stop the hate.
Right.
Holding that flag with that sign is going to make people stop and think, what's he talking about? And that's exactly what happened. It was a black social studies or social worker major from SEMO named Corey. Mm-hmm. And I'm holding my sign out there with my flag, and I seen him drive by, and he pulled back around. He was real polite. I will say he pretty much agreed with nothing we stand for, but he still believed that, nobody should vandalize that monument. But he said, sir, I believe you're contradicting yourself. And I said, well, how so? He said, well, you're holding a sign that says stop the hate, but you're holding a Confederate flag. And I said, yes. And we had a very civil conversation. I was just explaining my point of view, and he was explaining his point of view. And this little one-man protest of mine broke a lot of stereotypes because I saw a lot of black people drive by. Maybe some of them looked at me funny or anything, but none of them threatened me or yelled at me. But it was a rich, wealthy white man in a Cadillac who drove by slow and rolled down to that guy drove off and said, well, do you understand the meaning of the sign now? I thought it was funny that there's probably two people that couldn't disagree more on this subject than he and I, but yet he respected me enough and my right enough that instead of just doing a drive-by cursing at me, he pulled over, came up, shook my hand, introduced himself, and we respected each other as men, and we had a civil conversation about the whole matter.
No, I lost you there for a second. Could you tell me what happened with the rich white man in the Cadillac? Could you repeat that for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, he drove by slowly and rolled down his window. I could tell you part of what he said. The other part you would have to edit out.
Well, yeah, let's try to keep it clean.
But basically, he screamed, "The war's not at halftime. You blankety blanks lost. You need to get over it." Called me some more first names, and then, told me where I could go.
Wow. Could you tell if he was? I mean, obviously he's not a gentleman, but could you tell if he was Southern from his accent, or if he was a non-Southerner? Could you tell?
Well, he definitely, his plates were Missouri. He had the same accent that I did, but clearly his beliefs were not like mine.
That's tragic. That's tragic.
Yeah, well, and obviously, maybe the game is maybe the war is at halftime, because if it wasn't, I brought this up to the media. They were shocked about this, and I said, this is going on all over the South.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, even as far north as Gettysburg, and in Georgia, what's that called, the Yellow Dirt Cemetery? There's a Georgia power company that apparently owns the land or something now. But anyway, I don't know if they own it or not, but I know they sent a guy out to pull all the Confederate
flags off the graves. Yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't localized to Cape Girardeau, Missouri. This has been going on. It appears to me it kind of started around 2007. It's just been consistently going on around the country. Richmond, I know, I believe Jacksonville, Florida. There was a monument that got damaged in North Carolina. They don't want them putting it back up. And, even when they put flags on private property, they're trying to insinuate we don't have the right to do that either.
Yeah. Yeah, there was actually a monument about 10 minutes from where I live, just across the river in Augusta, Georgia. There's a beautiful Confederate monument in downtown Augusta. And unfortunately, there's a black nationalist shop that's just across the street from it. And the area has really gone down a lot, that area there. And it was defaced in a similar way that your monument there in southeastern Missouri was. But this time, it was very clear the attack on it, referenced the KKK and, white supremacy and that sort of thing. So I guess it was more of a standard attack in that respect. But like you say, it is going on all over the place.
Yeah, I consider it an epidemic. They are trying to literally erase all aspects of our Southern history.
Sure.
They don't want us to exist. And I will not call him a gentleman, but the man in the Cadillac, it's obvious, it burned his soul to see me standing out there by that monument with that flag. How dare somebody stand up to that vandalism?
Right.
How dare somebody stand out there proud and show the public that you're a proud Southerner and you don't think what happened to that monument was right. This man, he had hate in his eyes, I can tell you that. He had hate in his eyes toward me, hate in his eyes toward the monument and to the flag I carried.
Yeah. Now, can you tell me have you heard from the local people there, and what's the general feeling of the folks in that area, in that community, about this attack?
The attack on the monument is pretty much unanimous. Nobody could believe that they did it.
Right.
Now, when the news interviewed me, of course, they got my side of the story, and they went out and got some opposing views. One gentleman said that he could not believe I was holding the Confederate flag. I was behind the times, all the usual arguments. Said it had all been settled long ago, but, I maintain if it had, our monuments wouldn't be getting vandalized.
Sure.
But, I know the news has to get an opposing view, but the barometer that I use is the forums on the Southeast Missourian website. There were a few people on the article that featured me that criticized me, but when you really tick somebody off in that area, they got a forum that they call Speak Out. And, you submit your views, little short viewpoints, and I really expected somebody to trash me in one of those forums following that article and my protest and the news coverage. And, you know, not one person went to the Speak Out forum and criticized what I did, which tells me that I had a lot of support for what I did, and there's a lot of support to catch whoever perpetrated this crime.
That's good to hear. Now, I've seen pictures that you've posted. It's changing the subject a little bit, but it's related, that you've posted from the Marble Hill area and that area around there in southeastern Missouri, showing quite a few Confederate flags in that area. So it does seem like there's almost kind of a resurgence in Southern identity, and Southern pride in that area. Can you comment on that for a second?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. A good friend of mine, a couple years ago, we went out and bought 150 Confederate flags, and the mission was to give them out to people, and they were supposed to display them outside, not in the garage, not on their bedroom wall, outside.
Right.
You know, and I'd say about a quarter of people that took these flags put them on the outside, and the rest did who knows what. So we thought, you know, if somebody really wants one, they can buy one. You know, we shouldn't have to. It was a good idea, but if people were truly interested in showing pride for their heritage, they would buy these things, you know. And it's been pretty quiet around here, but starting this summer, it made me very proud to see this. But, you know, I see a lot of kids driving around with Confederate flags mounted in the bed of their pickup, you know, flying in the air as they're driving by. And there's a local business that displays it now. And it's like you said, it appears to be a resurgence. And this time, it wasn't us prodding them to do it. This time, they went out and got their own flags. And they did this on their own, which makes this, you know, the fact that they're doing this feel so much better.
Yeah, I imagine so. That's excellent to hear. Well,
yeah.
Clint, I appreciate you talking with us, and I want to commend you for standing up for our heritage and for the monument and doing all that you do.
Well, you know, you don't need a whole group of people. You proved this, and I believe Shane Long's proved this. You don't need a whole group of people to have an impact. You know, it was just me, my flag, and my sign I made. And I got on the radio, I got in the newspaper, and I got on TV. Good coverage for our cause. You know, all it takes is one person with some conviction to stand up for our rights and for our heritage, and especially for those soldiers that can't stand up for themselves anymore. It's important that we stand up for them and defend their honor, because they can't do that for themselves anymore.
Well, that's true. That's true. Now, if folks want to check out your website, I know that you've started a news website. Do you have the URL or the name that they could Google?
The news website, I've not dedicated as much time to it as I would like, but I would like to direct people to Confederate News, a news blog that I do, mainly has to do with things that would interest the Sons of Confederate Veterans and organizations like that. But the URL is http://myscv.wordpress.com. myscv.wordpress.com. Yes, sir.
All right, Clint. Well, I appreciate you talking with me, and I hope we get these. I hope they get these fellas there, or whoever did this in Missouri. I
do know the SCV is going to offer a $1,000 reward. So maybe that will be enough to make somebody turn on somebody else. But I'm still going to try and keep the word out there. Still work on this, on the media, to try and follow up on this story, you know.
Well, I hope it goes well. Thanks for talking with me, Clint.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for listening to the Southern Nationalist Network podcast. Please visit our website at southernnationalistnetwork.com for lots more information, articles, and multimedia about the culture, history, and politics of the traditional South.